Hey guys, tonight we stroll into the foggy, rain-slicked alleyways of 18th century Paris, a city of carriages, cravats, and cobblestones that seem to mock your every step with puddles you swear weren't there a second ago. You pull your coat tighter, your shoes squelch, and you try to ignore the dripping sensation seeping down your neck. Because back then, carrying an umbrella wasn't just inconvenient, it was nearly scandalous. That little fabric dome you know and love today? In 1750s Paris, it might have drawn suspicious glances, sharp whispers, or even a muttered curse from a passing coachman. Umbrellas were not simply rain tools, they were statements. Misunderstood, mistrusted, and occasionally mistaken for weapons of snobbery. And here's the thing. If you'd been a stylish Parisian in powdered wig and satin waistcoat, you probably wouldn't survive this walk. Not because of the weather, though that's certainly damp, but because of the side eyes you'd get just for trying to stay dry. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Go ahead, drop it in the comments. We're building a sleepy little globe here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along Rue Saint-Honoré, avoiding puddles the size of soup bowls, flinching slightly as a cart splashes past. A woman in a towering powdered wig scowls at your shoulders. Not because of your coat, not because of your face, because you're holding an umbrella. It's a modest thing, really. Curved wooden handle, waxed canvas, ribs made of baleen. But to her, it's a statement, an insult, as if you believe your head deserves more protection than hers. You tip it politely, and she snorts. Somewhere, a coachman mutters something unpleasant about lazy walkers. A Paris in the 1700s runs on a particular kind of soggy logic. For one, rain means work. It's an opportunity for coachmen to scoop up drenched pedestrians desperate for a dry ride, for hat sellers to peddle waterproof tricorns, for cafes to drag out canopies and charge extra for seats under them. The wet street isn't a nuisance. It's an economy. And your umbrella? A small rebellion against that. A silent suggestion that you don't need the infrastructure, that you might just take care of yourself, thank you very much. Historians still argue whether umbrellas were widely used by the lower classes before the upper classes caught on, or whether they trickled down from imported vanity to practical necessity. Either way, in this moment, you feel the weight of every soggy shoe and soggier stare. The sky opens wider, as if Paris itself is judging you. A baker rushes by with his tray of brioches under one arm and a cloth over his head. A priest tightens his robe and offers a polite glare. Even the statues seem a bit judgmental tonight. Your umbrella, however, does its job perfectly. And that may be the problem. Because in a city that prides itself on grit, charm, and a certain kind of theatrical suffering, staying dry feels like cheating. You pass a group of students huddled under a theater awning. One whistles. "Monsieur thinks he's English," someone calls out, half teasing, half cruel. You smile faintly, because technically, they're not wrong. The modern umbrella, portable, personal, and vaguely respectable, did enter France through British influence. Imported by way of vanity, It arrived with the same aura of exotic curiosity as tea, long spoons, and that unsettling habit of walking quickly without being chased. Rain taps the canvas above you, soft and steady. You watch it bead and run down like a whisper. Ahead, the lanterns flicker. Horse hooves clop. A child jumps in a puddle with such enthusiasm that even the fountain turns to watch. And still, you walk, upright, dry, suspiciously unbothered. A woman selling chestnuts leans out of her cart. "Your poor hat must miss the rain," she says. You nod and keep going. The rain continues, but softer now, like it's grown bored of making a point. You pass a row of shop fronts, their awnings sagging under collected drizzle, and pause in front of a window filled with powdered wigs and ribboned garters. The reflection that greets you is faintly ridiculous. Damp shoes, windswept cravat, and that controversial umbrella held like a contraband violin. Behind you, a clatter of hooves draws your attention. A carriage lumbers past, lanterns swinging, driver hunched and soaked through, but scowling less at the weather and more at you. You catch the look. It's practiced, almost theatrical, a cocktail of offense, disbelief, and professional envy. Because if more people use umbrellas, fewer need rides. It's a simple equation, really. In 18th century Paris, the coachman is both taxi and small-time noble. He gets you out of the rain, through the mud, and across town with all the flourish of a carnival act. A well-timed downpour means business. And you, with your private dome of dryness, you're a threat to his livelihood. Some coachmen reportedly jeered umbrella users. Others tried to splash them on purpose, purely for market preservation. There's even an apocryphal tale of one umbrella carrier who mysteriously ended up in the Seine after refusing a ride. No charges were filed, just soggy silence. Historians still argue whether coachmen led an actual anti-umbrella movement, or whether they were simply the loudest complainers. Either way, the umbrella was bad for repeat business. You continue walking, turning down a narrower street, where cobblestones are closer to soup than solid ground. A fishmonger is sweeping out puddles with a broom and a glare. She mutters, "Back when people had manners, they walked wet like everyone else." You nod respectfully, though you're starting to suspect that etiquette in Paris is just another name for shared discomfort. You duck beneath a wooden awning, which creaks overhead with water weight. Next to you, a young man is trying, failing really, to keep a paper-wrapped parcel dry beneath his hat. You offer him a space under your umbrella. He declines with a look that suggests he'd rather eat the hat. It's a point of pride. Getting soaked is proof of patience, of resilience, of community. The wet hat economy, as it might cheekily be called today, thrives on this. Hat sellers stock special felt blends. Cobbler stalls sprout overnight, peddling waterproofing wax. Newspapers run advertisements for rain-polished boots and coats that defy the heavens. Entire storefronts exist purely because nobody wants to be the fool caught in a downpour without flair. Umbrellas, by contrast, eliminate all that flair. No dripping brim, no melodramatic coat shaking, no theatrical wringing of sleeves. You just stay dry. And that's the problem. You pass a pair of schoolboys walking stiffly, one with a newspaper clutched over his curls. The other, more daring, walks with no cover at all, head tilted proudly into the drizzle. He bumps you on purpose. Better to walk like a Parisian, he says. You don't answer. You just shift your umbrella slightly and enjoy the fact that your collar is still dry. Farther along the street, you see a gathering around a new shop, a hatter's pop-up stall, complete with colorful banners, and a man in a too bright waistcoat shouting over the patter of rain. Why cover your shame with canvas when you can crown your courage with wool? It's catchy. Wrong, but catchy. You admire the salesmanship. It's the 18th century version of a marketing war. Team hat versus team parapluie. Guess which side you're on. You think back to a pamphlet you spotted yesterday, left folded on a cafe table. It was titled, On the Effeminacy of the Modern Rain Shunner, which is a fancy way of saying, umbrellas make you soft. Apparently, real Parisians let their wrists get wet. Real Parisians develop an instinct for ducking under tavern signs, leaning against cafe doors, and pretending the chill in their bones is just fashionable. You roll your eyes. Your umbrella bobs gently with the motion. Raindrops pitter-patter off the canopy, forming a rhythm as familiar as footsteps. You begin to notice something else. The people walking in sync with you are all umbrella-less, and all slightly behind, as if the umbrella is leading, and they're letting you break the storm first. Interesting. You wonder if that's what scares them. Not the dryness, not the canvas, but the quiet suggestion that maybe, just maybe, one doesn't have to suffer quite so dramatically to live here. You reach a corner where the bakery meets the barber shop, two places that smell confusingly similar this time of day. Yeast, soap, and singed hair. A stray cat is curled beneath a crate of onions, smug in its chosen dryness. You consider joining it. Instead, you stop and shake your umbrella gently. A few stray drops arc outward and land with satisfying little splashes on cobbles, a doorstep, and, unfortunately, the boot of a man in a powdered wig. He stares. You brace. But instead of shouting, he simply raises a brow and says, "Imported, is it?" You nod. It's always safest to agree. He sniffs. Can't be from Lyon. They'd never cut the ribs so narrow. You smile slightly. He isn't mad. He's intrigued. And that's worse, because now he steps closer, examining the stitching like it's an unchaperoned opera singer. You know, he adds, they say the first man to carry one of those in Paris was English. Walked right down the Pont Neuf with his head dry and his soul in peril. He says this as if he were there. Historians still argue who exactly brought umbrellas to France first. Some credit Jonas Hanway, the English traveler known for parading about London beneath one. Others think it was Parisian merchants importing from the East, copies of Persian and Chinese parasols, rebranded for European rain. Whoever it was, one thing's clear. The umbrella was never just an object. It was a disruption. A quiet one, granted, with spokes and a smug sense of elevation, but a disruption nonetheless. The powdered man peers upward, judging the rain. Still, I suppose it's useful, he murmurs. If you don't mind looking like you've something to prove. You do your best impression of someone with nothing to prove and keep walking. Past a row of shuttered shops, you duck under the narrow awning of a milliner's atelier. Inside, women fuss over bonnets with ribbons that could lasso clouds. One glances out the window, sees your umbrella, and makes the sign of the cross. You're not even sure she's Catholic. A courier sprints by, cloak flying, parcels flapping like rebellious flags. He has no umbrella, just raw determination and the velocity of someone who regrets saying, "I'll deliver it no matter the weather." Your umbrella shields you from the spray he kicks up. A small, private victory. A few blocks later, a baker's apprentice jogs toward you, holding a towering loaf of something that might be bread or an early architectural prototype. As he passes, a gust of wind catches his hat and sends it sailing. You catch it, with your umbrella, a perfect hook. He freezes, then bows low. "Merci, monsieur." You nod, passing him the soggy tricorn. "Fine tool," he mutters, "though the barbers say it makes your spine crooked." You don't argue. You've already heard that one. Umbrellas, according to popular gossip, cause weak wrists, delicate lungs, moral softness, and, bizarrely, bad poetry. One particularly sour pamphlet accused umbrellas of encouraging a nation of leaners, not striders, whatever that means. You stop beside a fountain and take a moment to look around. The city glistens. Lanterns reflect off wet stone. Parisians dart like actors on a rainy stage, ducking, dodging, dignified even as they drip. And you? You're still dry. You're still here. And more notably, you're starting to feel a strange mix of shame and pride, like wearing new shoes to a peasant's dance. A man selling roasted chestnuts waves at you, then shakes his head. "You know, I tried one of those once. Couldn't close it. Thought I'd die in there." You nod sympathetically. The early umbrellas were tricky. Collapsible models didn't appear in France until later in the century. Before that, most were stiff, stubborn, and likely to catch wind like sails in a harbor. There's a widely mocked image from the time of a man being carried off by his umbrella during a storm. It's unclear if it's satire or public warning. The man chuckles to himself. "My wife says they make you look like a mushroom." You offer a half bow. "A dry mushroom," you say. He laughs. Progress. You pass a row of horse troughs, slick with rain and rippling gently in the breeze. A boot disappears into one with a slosh, not yours mercifully, and a cursing man hobbles out, flinging water behind him like an angry fountain. He doesn't notice you, but his horse does. The beast gives your umbrella a suspicious eye. You step sideways, remembering an important, if unspoken, rule of 18th century Paris. Umbrellas and horses do not mix, especially not early umbrellas. Their collapsible ribs creaked like angry chairs. Their waxed canvas rustled, and when opened suddenly, they resembled nothing so much as predatory birds in formal wear. Coach horses, who had enough on their minds with cobbles and whips and slippery turns, understandably didn't care for this. A startled horse could bolt. A bolted horse could upend a carriage. An upended carriage could ruin your entire week. There were stories. A parasol snapped open near the Rue de Bac, and 3 chickens, 2 horses, and 1 elderly duchess never recovered. Another account describes a man losing his powdered wig and his marriage in the same afternoon, all thanks to a poorly timed umbrella gust. Historians still argue whether these incidents were exaggerated to maintain the fragile dignity of those too proud to carry one themselves, or if the umbrellas really were that frightening. Either way, the animals weren't consulted. As you round a corner, your own umbrella catches a draft. It tugs at your hand like a spoiled child. You hold fast. Parisians nearby wince. One woman clasps her pearls. A coachman mutters a prayer. A nearby dog growls softly. You ease the umbrella downward, lowering it to shoulder height. Less sail, more shield. A man tips his hat in approval. "You handle it better than most," he says. The last fellow knocked over a cafe sign. The waiters nearly revolted. You thank him. He walks on, umbrella-less, but with a well-oiled cape that gleams like raven feathers. You stop at a small cafe, wooden shutters drawn back just far enough to let out a glow of candlelight and the aroma of onion soup and faint ambition. A waiter with slicked hair and a towel over one arm stands in the doorway, scanning the street. He eyes your umbrella with mild contempt, then gestures to the coat hooks just inside. "No umbrellas at the table," he says. "Too political." You blink. He sighs. "It's a thing. The lady at table 5 says they make her anxious." You nod and leave it by the door. Inside, the cafe is cozy in a way that feels slightly staged, curtains tied just imperfectly enough to appear spontaneous, bottles angled for aesthetic disarray, a fireplace crackling with theatrical fervor. You sit near a window, able to glance outside where your umbrella now leans like a misbehaving cousin. The waiter returns, pours you something warm and indecipherable, and adds, "My uncle used to carry one, swore it cured his arthritis." You raise a brow. He shrugs. Or caused it. He never decided. In the corner, a couple is arguing in low tones about how real Parisians embrace the rain. The woman gestures to the puddles. The man points at his soggy knees. It's hard to tell who's winning. Nearby, a stack of newspapers sits beneath a sign that reads, "Take one, return never." You do. Page 3 features a scathing column. Umbrellas, a canvas shield for the cowardly spine. The writer accuses umbrella carriers of arrogance, of weakness, and oddly, of secretly being Venetian. You sip your mystery drink and read on. Apparently, umbrella users walk with the false dignity of a man who believes the sky owes him something. It's actually a good line. You look out the window. Raindrops trace lazy paths down the glass. A boy passes, soaked but smiling, arms spread like he's conducting the storm. Behind him, an older man walks beneath a massive oilskin umbrella, limping slightly, face calm. He's not showing off. He's just comfortable. The contrast is sharp, and suddenly, very funny. You chuckle into your cup, startling the waiter. He peers at you suspiciously, as if comfort were an accusation. Then he glances at the door, at the umbrella, and frowns. You finish your drink, still unsure what it was, possibly onion wine, and step back into the drizzle. The umbrella is just where you left it, droplets rolling off the waxed canvas like it's sighing in relief at being touched again. You open it slowly. A couple under the cafe awning flinches, though nothing dramatic happens. No lightning bolt. No duel. No panicked horse. Just gentle rain muffled against stretched fabric, and a mild groan from one of the joints. You'll have to oil that later. You walk on, through narrow passages and over slick cobblestones, past pastry stalls wrapped in tarps, and seamstresses rolling up bolts of damp silk. You cross a bridge where the Seine glows like poured pewter under the gaslights. A rat scuttles past. Even it is wet. Up ahead, there's a cluster of men huddled beneath an overhang outside a print shop. A sign reads, Parapluie pamphlets, essays, cartoons, and petitions. You stop. This is what they called the Café Canopy Crisis, a polite term for a very petty war. It began when cafes started installing permanent rain canopies to protect customers sitting outside, particularly fashionable ones, who still wanted to be seen, even in bad weather. The trouble came when umbrella users refused to fold theirs, despite being undercover. Arguments ensued. Some said the umbrellas blocked the view. Others claimed it was double dipping on dryness. Waiters reportedly refused to serve unless the silly bat wings were lowered. A small riot broke out at Café Rosé. 2 wigs were lost. A cartoon from the time, posted in the print shop window, shows a man at a cafe table, his umbrella up, his ego larger still. The waiter, arms crossed, stares him down. A line beneath reads, Monsieur, if you wish to dine in a tent, you might have stayed in the colonies. You laugh out loud. The print shop owner hears and steps out. He's got ink-stained fingers and a face like someone who enjoys the rain only when it messes with other people. You laugh, he says. But it's serious business. My cousin's cafe lost 5 customers last month to umbrella men. Umbrella men? You ask. He nods solemnly. The ones who carry them inside. He shudders. You don't mention your cafe stop. Instead, you gesture at the cartoon. They really started fights? Oh, many. Mostly verbal. One man refused to close his umbrella and called another patron a drip sympathizer. The insults, still unclear. Historians still argue whether the cafe canopy crisis was exaggerated by the print culture of the day or genuinely changed etiquette. Some say it reflects broader anxieties about individualism, privilege, and shifting class identity. Others just think people hated being poked in the eye by ribs. The shopkeeper sighs. I tried selling umbrella holders, little stands, like for canes. Thought it was brilliant. No one bought them. Said it encouraged the disease. You raise a brow. What disease? He leans in. Dryness, and winks. You thank him, purchase a copy of the cartoon, which he insists on rolling himself, and walk off smiling. Rain begins again, heavier now, and your umbrella bears it like a champ. You feel oddly smug. And that's when you realize that's what they don't like. The umbrella doesn't just shield you from rain, it shields you from shared experience. The damp misery of a Parisian storm is a communal ritual. Coat-tugging, hat-wringing, cafe-dashing solidarity. When you walk through it untouched, you're not participating. You're observing. Above it. And in a city built on style, performance, and the art of dramatic suffering, being dry isn't neutral. It's borderline treason. You pass a group of musicians sheltering beneath a wide shopfront. One of them nods at your umbrella and says, "Playing in the rain makes better flutes. Maybe you should try it sometime." You tip your hat. I'll keep it in mind, you say, and keep walking. A dog trots past you entirely unbothered. A priest blesses a puddle he nearly stepped in. And you? You stroll quietly onward. Dry. You turn down a quieter street now, Rue des Quatre Vents, where even the name sounds like a sigh. The lanterns here flicker softly, their flames hesitant, as if unsure whether they've been invited to the party. The rain has settled into a whispery rhythm, like fingertips drumming on silk. It's peaceful. Or at least, it would be, if not for the sudden rustle of movement from a doorway ahead. A man in a long gray coat emerges, struggling with something above his head. You recognize the sound immediately. The stiff, reluctant stretch of an umbrella being forced open. Another one. You slow slightly. He looks up. You nod. He nods back. Two umbrella bearers on the same stretch of Paris sidewalk. Unheard of. Possibly illegal. You both chuckle like co-conspirators, and for a moment it feels like you're part of a very dry underground movement. The man walks beside you for a block or two, the umbrellas forming a soft percussion section against the drizzle. You ask where he got his. Marseille, he says, smuggled in with a crate of anchovies and powdered soap. Don't ask. You don't. Instead, you ask why. He shrugs. Tired of pretending my socks are supposed to squelch. Tired of ducking under tavern signs and wagging my eyebrows like I'm flirting with the rain. You get it. I tried to convince my wife, he adds, but she says umbrellas are for poets and spies. She prefers a bonnet and a firm pout. He stops suddenly, points to a boarded-up storefront. Used to be an umbrella repair shop there. Only one in this arrondissement. Shut down last spring. Why, you ask? He smirks. Not enough shameful customers. Historians still argue whether umbrella repair shops were ever widespread in Paris, or simply popped up in waves like anti-pickle shops or revolutionary pamphlet stands. What's clear is that for a while there was an infrastructure of resistance, men and women who dared to carry, repair, and defend the contraption with the quiet confidence of umbrella smugglers. He waves goodbye at the next corner. Stay dry, he calls, grinning. You smile back. You too, fellow sinner. You walk on alone. Soon you arrive at a small square where statues lean dramatically in all directions, as though caught mid-monologue. A fountain burbles something poetic. You pause, letting the rain wrap around the edges of your shelter. And that's when you see it. A line of figures under a church overhang, each carrying an umbrella. 5, maybe 6. Some canvas, some silk. One with a wooden parrot carved into the handle. They stand there silently, nodding to each new arrival, like the slowest secret society in France. You cross to them. One steps forward, an older woman with a green shawl and spectacles fogged from the mist. We thought we were alone, she says. Apparently not, you reply. Another umbrella opens, a soft gasp, a ripple of admiration for the craftsmanship. One of them reaches out and gently taps yours, an umbrella handshake maybe. You stand in a semicircle of contraband dryness, quietly defying the rain and the judgment of coachmen, pamphleteers, and hat-makers everywhere. They don't speak much. It's not that kind of club. But they watch the street like guardians of a very silly rebellion. A coach trundles by, The driver spots the group, slows, sneers, and mutters, "Cowards." You all smile. Because deep down, you know, nothing enrages a wet man faster than someone who had a plan. The woman in the shawl leans toward you. "They'll catch up," she says. "They always do. First they mock, then they notice, then they buy 3. You nod, looking out into the night. The rain falls gently, catching lantern light, dancing like lazy sparks. And for the first time all evening, your shoulders feel completely at ease. The Umbrella Society, if you can call it that, disbands quietly, like steam slipping through shutters. One by one, the members nod their farewells and disappear into the misty dark, their umbrellas bobbing like discreet top hats with opinions. You're the last to leave. Back on the main road, the city breathes again. The hiss of wheels on wet stone, the clop of hooves that somehow sound slightly judgmental, the low chatter of Parisians who believe a night without discomfort is a night wasted. You stroll past a line of market carts being lashed with ropes for the night, cabbages and turnips tucked in like well-behaved children. A portly man in a soggy apron looks up, squints at your umbrella, and mutters, "And so the dry tyranny marches on." You offer a polite smile. He hurls a carrot in your general direction. It misses by several blocks, but the message is clear. You duck into a narrow passageway called Rue des Ombres, Street of Shadows, which feels fitting. Here, the rain falls more vertically, as if it's run out of tricks. The buildings lean in like gossips, listening to your footsteps. You pause by a lantern post, where a public notice board is plastered with flyers. One reads, "Attention! Umbrella users now required to yield right-of-way to bonnet wearers in all narrow corridors." Another adds, "Warning! Use of umbrellas during public speeches may be interpreted as protest or cowardice." Historians still argue whether these notices were official city policy or just the work of one particularly soaked municipal clerk with a vendetta. Either way, they reflect the absurd negotiations that come with any new invention, even something as simple as not wanting to arrive somewhere damp. You push onward. Ahead, a group of students walks shoulder to shoulder, loud and theatrical, arms waving, capes flaring. As you approach, one spots your umbrella and flings his arms wide. "Mon Dieu!" he cries. "A walking canopy!" His friends laugh. You do not. Instead, you tilt your umbrella slightly toward them, letting a fine curtain of runoff trickle down right beside the loudest one's boot. He jumps. They pass by in soggy silence. You continue. As you turn onto Rue du Livre, the rain slackens for a moment. A single window glows above a bookstore, its sign swinging gently. La pluie et le papier. Rain and paper. How appropriate. You step inside. The bell jingles. The smell is old pages, candle wax, and slightly damp ambition. A clerk with crooked glasses looks up. "We don't sell umbrellas." You raise a brow. "Good. I brought my own." He nods approvingly and gestures to a corner shelf. "You might enjoy this," he says. "Social upheaval through the lens of personal dryness." You take the pamphlet. On the cover, a stick figure holds an umbrella while others scowl in the rain. The subtitle reads, "A Treatise on Technological Arrogance." You flip through it. The thesis is dense but familiar. Progress is isolating. Comfort is divisive. And umbrellas are just a metaphor for modern detachment. One passage claims that a dry man in a wet crowd is the loneliest thing in Paris. You buy the pamphlet anyway. The clerk wraps it in oilskin, more to protect his dignity than the paper. He hesitates before handing it over. "Don't read it in public," he warns. "People will talk." You assure him people already are. Back outside, your umbrella greets you like an old friend. You shake it gently, less out of habit, more to irritate any nearby critics. The rain picks up again. Of course it does. But you barely notice anymore. You glance skyward, watching droplets land on the taut canvas above, bouncing away like tiny skeptics denied entrance. Then you hear it. A tiny plink, followed by a muffled clink. You frown and tilt the umbrella. A coin? No, not quite. It's a button. Someone above has dropped a button from their window, perhaps by accident, perhaps in protest, or maybe, just maybe, as a symbolic offering. You pocket it without a word and walk on, umbrella steady, heart a little lighter. The streetlights flicker. The puddles deepen. But you? You remain precisely as wet as you wish to be. Your boots carry you across Place Dauphine, where the rain now falls with the rhythmic insistence of a baker kneading dough, firm but not furious. The square is quiet, except for the wet splat of drops on stone benches and the occasional shuffle of a passing umbrella-less soul, dripping with both water and disdain. You sit for a moment, on the dry edge of a stone planter, watching as a pigeon attempts to shelter beneath an upturned basket. It eyes your umbrella with clear envy. A couple wanders by, sharing a cloak and arguing softly. She gestures upward at the rain. He gestures downward at his soaked shoes. You know how this ends. Still, you can't help but think, this city is oddly allergic to dryness. Which brings to mind one of the more peculiar stories you've heard, of a duel fought over an umbrella. It happened sometime around 1764, depending on whose diary you believe. Two gentlemen, let's call them Delacroix and Beaumarchais, though those may be pseudonyms, were walking near the Palais Royal. Delacroix carried a parasol, blue silk with a handle shaped like a lion's head. Beaumarchais, ever the traditionalist, wore only his hat and the simmering contempt of the recently rained upon. Words were exchanged. Accusations were made. Effeminate, pretentious, and flappable. The last one apparently stinging the most. They agreed to settle it with swords, in the park, at dawn. Historians still argue whether the duel actually happened or if it was invented by pamphleteers to sell copies. Some versions claim they fenced with umbrellas instead of blades, more performance than danger. Others say one of them tripped, the duel was cancelled, and they ended up founding a glove business together. Whatever the truth, the story became a favorite in salons and barber shops alike, symbolizing the clash between tradition and practicality, between stoicism and softness, between wet pride and dry defiance. You rise from the bench. The rain has picked up again, bouncing now with that lively tempo that makes shopkeepers groan and street performers retreat. You cross to a row of vendors closing up their carts. One sells roasted chestnuts, another candied figs. A third, somewhat optimistically, is still trying to sell handkerchiefs embroidered with the phrase, "I prefer the rain." He spots your umbrella and sneers. "You're what's killing poetry." You blink. "Come again?" He points dramatically. "When a man gets wet, he feels. He aches. He writes things. But you? You walk through life bone dry and emotionally constipated." You consider buying a handkerchief out of pity, then reconsider when he adds, "Your umbrella's probably English." You move along, past the bakeries, now closed and fragrant, past the lamplighters, making their slow rounds, poles in hand, coaxing flames to life. One of them nods politely at your umbrella and says, "Had one once. Caught fire. Haven't trusted them since." He does not elaborate. A few streets later, you spot a poster pasted to a brick wall, a caricature of a man with a towering umbrella, hunched over, shielding himself from a single droplet falling from a cloud no bigger than a teacup. Beneath it, in florid script, "Is this who we are now?" It's signed by a group calling themselves Les Mouillés Volontaires, the willingly wet. A real movement, believe it or not, founded by writers and dramatists who argued that rain was a moral cleanser and that umbrellas were the coward's path to comfort. Their salons featured open windows during storms. Their plays had entire acts performed under real drizzle. One manifesto claimed that to fear the sky is to insult the heavens. Their membership has dwindled, mostly because several caught pneumonia and their leader famously slipped in a puddle while denouncing drainage systems. Still, they left their mark. Some cafes still hang tiny signs reading, "No umbrellas beyond this point. Umbra eels cowardice." You ignore one as you step inside a narrow tavern, drawn by warmth and the smell of something aggressively meaty. The host eyes your umbrella. "Fold it," he says. You do. He nods and lets you pass. Inside, the laughter is loud, the fire louder, and the rain now only a faint percussion behind the window panes. You lean your umbrella against the wall, grab a seat, and smile. Because even here, even surrounded by proud wet shoulders and sopping cuffs, you know something they won't admit. They all secretly wish they had one. You sip something warm and vaguely herbal, possibly tea, possibly a broth once involved in a political scandal. Around you, the tavern is all elbows, knees, and dripping hats. Rain-glossed coats steam gently as the fire devours their dampness, and the air is thick with the scent of wet wool and dry judgment. Your umbrella, carefully propped by the door, draws the occasional sideways glance. One man glares at it as if it insulted his mother. Another leans over to his friend and whispers something, likely a pun and definitely unkind. But then, you spot her. In the corner booth, sipping slowly from a glass that glows amber in the firelight. She wears a midnight-colored dress, a velvet wrap, and beside her, an umbrella. Ivory-handled, embroidered edges, folded but proud. She sees you looking and raises an eyebrow. You raise yours back. It's not flirtation. It's solidarity. A waiter slinks up to your table, notepad in hand, pen behind one ear. "No offense," he murmurs, "but we don't usually get enthusiasts here." You tilt your head. Umbrella enthusiasts? He sighs. Dry ones. You ask what's on the menu. He hesitates. Rain pudding, gloom tart, and a special called No Shelter Sundae. Then he cracks a smile. Kidding. We've got stew. You order it. While you wait, the room swells with chatter. A man in the corner laments the recent trend of oilcloth cloaks. If you're not damp, how do you know it's really raining? He asks tragically. His companion nods. It's character building, like heartbreak, but colder. You glance again at the woman with the ivory umbrella. She's now speaking softly to a portly man with a monocle who appears to be offering her sugar cubes in exchange for umbrella handling tips. It's not clear if they know each other. It's not clear if they care. Your stew arrives, hot, thick, and surprisingly emotional. You eat slowly, absorbing the mood. This isn't just dinner. This is anthropology. One of the patrons suddenly slams his glass down and declares, "Umbrellas are a rejection of authenticity." Another stands and claps sarcastically. "Bravo, Henri. Next you'll tell us boots are an affront to mud." Someone mutters, "I like mud," and it gets quiet. Historians still argue whether this kind of anti-umbrella sentiment was born from genuine social values or merely a city-wide competition to suffer with more flair than the next person. In a place like Paris, even puddles had pride. As you finish your meal, the fire crackles with performative urgency. You thank the waiter, leave a coin, and collect your umbrella from its lonely vigil near the door. Back in the rain again, the air feels cleaner, the night deeper. You pass a wall plastered with handwritten notes, some poems, some manifestos, one recipe for leek soup. Amid them is a scrawled phrase in charcoal. Let it rain. I have things to feel. You smile and write beneath it. Let it rain. I have a plan. The next street is darker, quieter. Here, the umbrella feels less like armor and more like company. Raindrops tap the canopy in a rhythm almost like speech, occasional, percussive, oddly reassuring. You tilt it back slightly and watch as droplets streak down in playful rivulets, racing each other to the edge. That's when you spot the umbrella shop. Tiny, wedged between a bakery and a perfumery. Its window is fogged, but you can just make out the sign. Maison des Ombrelles. Est. 1629. Inside, shadows move. Candles flicker. You step in. A bell chimes, delicate like a teacup sighing. The interior is small but impossibly tall, with rows and rows of umbrellas hanging from the ceiling like chandeliers for the dry-hearted. Some are plain, some are exquisite. One looks like it may have once belonged to Voltaire. The shopkeeper appears silently from behind a curtain. He's short, bearded, and wears a waistcoat patterned with tiny clouds. He eyes your umbrella. "Canvas blend," he says. "Double-ribbed. Marseille?" You nod. He smiles. "Good year for umbrellas. Terrible year for boats." He walks a circle around you, squinting at the stitching. "Your seam's a little tired." You agree. "Stay a moment," he says. "I'll show you something stronger." And just like that, you're part of the next chapter. The shopkeeper disappears behind a brocade curtain that smells faintly of lavender and damp velvet. You stand quietly, umbrella folded in your hands, feeling as though you've stumbled into a secret library. Except instead of books, the knowledge is stitched into silk, canvas, and steel. You look up. Umbrellas hang like sleeping bats from the ceiling beams. Some are patterned with stars, others with maps of colonial ports or botanical diagrams. A few are so large they look like they were built to shelter entire philosophical conversations. One even has a discreet compartment near the handle. What it holds? You dare not guess. A grandfather clock ticks somewhere in the gloom. Then the curtain parts. The shopkeeper returns, cradling something long and wrapped in pale muslin. He unfurls it slowly, reverently, and reveals a masterpiece, a black umbrella with a handle carved into the shape of a serpent eating its own tail, the Ouroboros. He offers it with both hands. Royal Commission, 18th century, built for the Duc d'Orléans, never used. You raise an eyebrow. Why not? He smirks. Because he feared the rain was listening. Ah. You take it anyway. The balance is perfect. The canopy opens with a sound like a satisfied exhale, and the ribs, etched with tiny runes, look strong enough to withstand both a thunderstorm and a revolution. You ask how much. He waves a hand. No price. But if you carry it through the Place de Victoire, do so with dignity. You nod solemnly. Always. As you step back out into the street, the rain seems to hush around you, as though surprised. The umbrella shields you perfectly, the sound of droplets now mellow and musical, like someone plucking harp strings underwater. You pass a lamplighter who tips his hat and says, "Nice rig." You thank him. Around the corner, a group of children splash in puddles, shrieking with glee. One stops and stares at your umbrella. "Is that magic?" she asks. "Only if it keeps working," you say. She nods gravely. "Mine always turns inside out." Historians still argue whether umbrella craftsmanship in 18th century Paris ever truly achieved magic status, but certain households did treat them with near religious reverence. Some umbrellas were passed down like jewelry. Others had names. One family reportedly had theirs buried in the family crypt. Open. You keep walking. There's a bakery ahead with its shutters cracked, golden light bleeding through like butter between puff pastry layers. You peek inside. A woman kneads dough in slow, practiced rhythms. Her sleeves are rolled, her cheeks flushed. She sees your umbrella and smiles. Then, deliberately, she steps out into the rain, stands beside you, and simply watches the sky. "I had one," she says. "Lost it during the Carnival of Hats." You nod as though that explains everything. She leans in. "You're lucky. Not many good ones left." "I'm starting to see that." She waves a flour-dusted hand. "Keep it dry. Keep it proud." And just like that, she returns to her dough. You resume your walk, the umbrella feeling heavier now, not physically, but historically. Like you're not just shielding yourself from the rain, but carrying a symbol. A forgotten banner in the war between dry logic and wet romanticism. At the next intersection, a carriage rumbles by. The driver peers down, frowns, and calls out, "Expecting sunshine?" You smile. "Always prepared," you reply, and tip the Ouroboros handle his way. He mutters something about parade floats and moves on. You walk until the buildings thin, and the Seine emerges beside you, wide and quiet. Street lamps line the edge like sleepy sentinels. Across the river, Notre Dame looms like a giant caught mid-thought. You pause. The wind picks up slightly, and the umbrella holds, steady and unwavering. You realize then, it isn't just rain that makes people frown at umbrellas. It's resilience. A refusal to be soaked just because the world says you must. And perhaps somewhere deep down, that's why 18th century Parisians both feared and mocked them. Not because they were impractical, but because they worked. Because they made discomfort optional. And Paris never forgave anyone who dared skip the suffering. You tighten your grip on the handle, the serpent cold beneath your palm, and keep walking. The rain eases to a whisper now, less a storm, more a sleep-talking sky. You stroll beside the Seine, umbrella tilted just enough to frame the view. The river glimmers faintly, like a mirror someone forgot to wipe, and barges drift lazily beneath arched bridges. Your boots tap a rhythm on the cobblestones, keeping time with the raindrops that slide from your umbrella's edge. The path smells of damp stone, wet iron, and the faintest hint of overcooked onions from somewhere upriver. Up ahead, a bridge looms. Pont Neuf, the new bridge, which is, of course, the oldest one still standing. Because Paris. You make your way across it, watching as reflections shimmer beneath you. On the far side, you spot a familiar figure, a street preacher with wild hair and a hand-painted sign that reads, "Repent, ye who are dry." He spots you. "Ah!" he cries. "A canopy cringer! A sky denier!" You consider walking faster, but something in his theatrical shuffle makes you pause. "Do you know," he asks, stepping closer, "that the umbrella was invented to divide us?" You arch a brow. From what? The atmosphere? He nods solemnly. Exactly. Then he launches into a winding sermon about how the umbrella is the ultimate metaphor for mankind's arrogance, our refusal to be humbled by the heavens. You counter, "Maybe it's just a hat with ambition." He gasps as if you'd insulted the moon itself. You nod politely and continue on. Behind you he continues to shout, not at you, but at the clouds. "Come down and cleanse these smug souls," he howls. Historians still argue whether the 18th century anti-umbrella sermons were ever officially sanctioned, or simply the ramblings of overly damp philosophers who hadn't had a good croissant in weeks. But one recorded protest, dubbed the Wet Walk, involved nearly 300 Parisians parading through the streets in synchronized sogginess to protest umbrella taxation. Their chant? "Rain is for all." You reach the far end of the bridge and step into the Place du Châtelet. Here the mood shifts. A man on stilts is juggling oranges under a tarp. A woman sells tiny pastries from a cart shaped like a violin case. A mime gestures mournfully at the sky as if betrayed. You glance at your umbrella and wonder, briefly, if it should be folded out of politeness. But the drizzle has returned, and you decide that comfort is not a crime. even in public. In one corner, a painter is finishing a canvas, a melancholic scene of people huddled under awnings, their outlines blurred, their feet puddled. He catches sight of you and grins. "Would you pose?" he asks. For contrast. You oblige, standing quietly, umbrella open, gaze soft. He paints quickly, muttering to himself about composition and tension. After a few minutes, he steps back, satisfied. "It works," he says. "You're not the villain. You're the exception." You nod. "Same thing sometimes." He shrugs and offers you a crepe as payment. It's blueberry, slightly soggy. Perfect. You eat as you walk on, passing through Rue Saint-Denis, once a royal procession route, now just another thoroughfare dotted with gossip, horses, and the occasional insult hurled from a second-story window. You spot a man in a top hat running, coat flapping, drenched to the bone. He sees you, locks eyes for a beat, and mouths the word, "traitor." You consider handing him your umbrella. Then you remember. He's probably the same guy who laughed when you slipped on wet cobblestones 3 winters ago. That was a long fall, and a longer evening. No umbrella guilt today. As you approach the old city gates, you notice a small bronze plaque, nearly hidden behind ivy. Here once stood the workshop of Jacques Mounet, umbrella maker to the Revolutionary Court. Apparently, even the revolution needed to keep its documents dry. Inside the shop, according to some accounts, Mounet created a design called La Résistante, a reinforced umbrella said to withstand not just rain, but wind, spilled wine, and the disdain of mobs. It never caught on, but a single prototype is rumored to still exist. You wonder if you've just inherited its spiritual cousin. The Ouroboros handle fits snugly in your palm as you continue onward, the rain once again settling into its favorite rhythm, persistent but polite. Somewhere behind you, a window creaks open, and a woman sings softly, off-key but full of heart. You don't recognize the tune, but the mood is unmistakable. Dry, cozy, defiant. Just like you. The streets narrow as you turn into the Marais, where the rain filters more gently through the overhangs and wrought iron balconies. This part of Paris feels quieter, like it's listening. The kind of neighborhood where umbrellas aren't just tolerated, they're noted. You pass a baker closing up shop, sliding a warm baguette into a paper sleeve for a late customer. He nods at your umbrella with a kind of resigned respect, the way a knight might acknowledge a particularly well-forged enemy blade. "Still dry?" he asks. "Just barely," you answer. He chuckles. "That's the dream." A few more steps, and you hear the muffled strains of a harpsichord wafting from an open window. The music is elegant, lilting, a melody that probably required powdered wigs and too many buttons to compose. You pause under your umbrella, letting the notes mingle with the soft percussion of the rain. Behind you, a door opens. A woman in a faded shawl leans out and points skyward. "Is it going to stop?" You glance up. "Eventually." She sighs. "I was going to wear white." You nod sympathetically. "Best stick to beige." Historians still argue whether fashion or function drove the earliest umbrella adopters in Paris. Some suggest it was women of the court, unwilling to let perfectly sculpted wigs succumb to weather. Others insist it was simply practicality in a city that averaged 180 damp days a year. Fringe theorists claim umbrellas were smuggled in by exiled Englishmen trying to sell their dry shame under the radar. You keep walking, past shuttered art galleries and ivy-draped alleyways. One wrought iron gate creaks open beside you. A man peers out, mid-40s, pince-nez glasses, robes that suggest either a notary or someone who lost a bet at a philosophy salon. He sees your umbrella and waves you in. Quick, quick, before the neighbors judge. You follow. Inside is a small, candle-lit courtyard where 4 others huddle around a chessboard under a canvas canopy. Someone hands you a tart. "Welcome," one says, "to Le Parapluie Club." You blink. Another nods solemnly. "We meet every Thursday, except when it's sunny." "Especially when it's sunny," someone else corrects, out of protest. They play chess. They debate. They sip lemon liqueur from tiny porcelain cups and wear waterproof slippers. The rules are vague, but the tone is earnest. You learn that the club was formed after one of their founding members was denied entry to a theater for smuggling in ceiling furniture. That member now lives in Lyon, where she reportedly carries 2 umbrellas at once and is considered a minor celebrity. There's laughter and shared eye rolls at the weather, and one dramatic toast that ends with, "to dryness," and those bold enough to seek it. Then they grow quiet. Outside, the rain has slowed again. Now a hush, a sigh, the end of a long sentence. You thank them and leave the courtyard, stepping again into streets that feel just a little older, as if your presence, umbrella and all, has reminded them of something they once were. Down Rue de Turenne, you notice a statue, a bronze man holding nothing. His outstretched hand suggests he once held something important. A sword? A book? No. You look down at the plaque. "To the unknown umbrella bearer, may you never drip on another soul." You laugh softly. Someone had a sense of humor. At the end of the block, you pass a shop selling antique gloves. In the window, a framed handbill from 1789 advertising personal umbrella lessons for the anxious elite. There are illustrations, stick figures twirling, blocking, deflecting splashes with martial precision. Apparently, umbrella etiquette was once a discipline. You wonder how many duels that saved. You cross into Place de Vosges just as the bells toll 8. The square is nearly empty, save for a few determined strollers and a small dog in a raincoat. You offer it a nod. It sniffs in response. Your umbrella is steady, dry, glorious, and not a single person tries to insult you. Well, almost. A boy on a balcony shouts, "You're cheating!" You call back, "Only gravity!" He shrugs and disappears inside. You smile. The evening drapes itself around you, cool and quiet. And the umbrella? Still open. Still unbroken. Still just a little bit feared. The night has thickened now, slipping between buildings like ink through old paper. The rain is no longer a storm, nor even a drizzle. It's something gentler, a mist that lingers out of habit rather than conviction. Your umbrella catches it like a patient librarian shelving the sky's unfinished thoughts. You stroll down a narrow lane, Rue des Rosiers, where falafel vendors are packing up and cats skitter between crates. One tabby, particularly damp and particularly opinionated, pauses to glare at your umbrella before vanishing beneath a cart with a theatrical flick of its tail. You can almost hear it mutter, bourgeois. Onward. A poster flutters on a lamppost as you pass. Faded, but legible. Wet but unbowed. A cabaret in defense of drizzle. Featuring performers with names like La Mouche d'Avril and Jean-Pierre the Damp. You make a mental note to attend, or to at least pretend you did, at some future dinner party. As you turn onto Rue des Archives, you find yourself outside a shuttered cafe. On its blackboard, chalked in looping script, no umbrellas, no apologies, just coffee. You resist the urge to scratch out the first sentence. Instead, you stand still for a moment and listen. To the drip of water down ancient gutters, to the creak of shutters shifting in their sleep, to the distant hum of a string quartet practicing out of tune. Someone's second violin has opinions. You notice a plaque on the wall. It reads, "On this site, in 1786, Marie Béatrice Chardon carried the first umbrella to survive a full promenade through Paris without being snatched, mocked, or set aflame. She celebrated with a tart and 2 eclairs." There's a tiny etched umbrella beneath her name. Historians still argue whether Marie Beatrice's feat actually happened, or if it was a later invention meant to encourage young Parisians to embrace dryness. Regardless, pastry sales reportedly tripled that month. You find a bench beneath an awning and sit, your umbrella now resting like a sleepy bird in your lap. For the first time all evening, no one is watching you, no one is commenting, no one is sighing in faux tragic tones about your rejection of the moist soul of the city. It's kind of nice, but also a little quiet. Just as you're beginning to miss the absurdity, a man sidles up beside the bench. He's wearing a trench coat that looks older than Napoleon and holds an envelope in one hand. He glances at your umbrella, nods once, and slides the envelope toward you. Then he walks away. Inside is a small cream-colored card, embossed, gilded on the edges. It reads, "You are cordially invited to the Umbrella Society of the 5th Arrondissement. Thursday, 9 p.m. Bring your own shade." There is no address, just a small symbol in the corner. A closed umbrella, upright, encircled by laurel leaves. You smile. It's not the first time Paris has whispered back. You tuck the card into your coat pocket and continue walking, umbrella once more open above you. The city stretches ahead like a novel you're not quite ready to finish. A bell chimes in the distance, and somewhere, in some warm garret, a playwright leans over their desk, quill scratching furiously. Scene 3. The stranger arrives, dry as defiance. You round a corner into a broader boulevard. A row of taxis lines the curb, their drivers smoking, chatting, arguing about football and the relative depth of puddles on the left bank. One spots your umbrella. "Forecast says clear skies tomorrow," he offers, almost kindly. You nod. "I'll believe it when I'm dry." He laughs, and for once it's not mocking. It's understanding. It's the rain-soaked camaraderie of those who've chosen opposite shelters and still walk the same streets. And that, in Paris, is the closest thing to peace. You pause at a corner bakery still glowing with warmth, its windows fogged and golden. Inside, the baker leans over trays of croissants, and though his apron is flour-speckled and his eyes heavy, he hums. A slow lullaby only bakers and night watchers know. The door's slightly ajar, and the scent of warm butter escapes like a whispered secret. You step in, umbrella carefully furled and leaned in the entry corner, respectful now, like a guest at an ancestral altar. The baker greets you with a sleepy nod. "Rain's been good for business," he says. "Makes people crave warm things." You ask for a roll, something simple. He hands you a pain au lait, still soft from the oven. "You'll want this dry," he adds with a wink. "Eat it before the rain decides to apologize and ruins it." You sit at the lone window stool, looking out as the drizzle performs its slow ballet across the cobblestones. The umbrella stands silently beside you, its canvas drying, its ribs relaxed. You imagine it's a little smug. You take a bite. It's perfect. Behind you, the baker resumes humming. You recognize the tune now. It's Frère Jacques, but slower, almost bluesy. The kind of version that might play during an 18th century umbrella duel at sunrise. Historians still argue whether duch duels actually occurred, whether Parisian etiquette ever elevated umbrellas to such importance that honor could be offended by a misplaced drip. But one record in the city archives does mention a dispute at Rue Claire between two gentlemen, both in possession of shaded apparatus, whose conflict was resolved only by cake. You sip the complimentary chocolate chaud he slides over, steam curling up like the ghost of a dream. The warmth seeps into your fingers, your chest, your brain. Outside, a couple passes under a shared umbrella, leaning into each other, laughing at something you'll never know. You smile. Rain isn't so bad when you're ready for it. You rise, thank the baker, and retrieve your umbrella. The canopy is cool and dry again, like it's been waiting patiently for its next chapter. You step outside and unfurl it with the elegance of a stage magician. One swift motion, no hesitation. A small splash of applause from a passing pigeon confirms the moment's success. You head down Rue Vieille du Temple, where galleries and ateliers sleep behind their shutters. Here, your footsteps echo softly, and even the rain seems respectful. The kind of silence that feels hand-carved. A cart lumbers past, its driver nodding to you beneath a plastic tarp so wide it could cover a continent. He gestures at your umbrella. Yours has class. You nod. Yours has ambition. He laughs. Maybe next year I'll trade in for style. The night deepens. Somewhere above, a shutter creaks open and a parrot caws, "Umbrellas are lies," before being hushed by someone muttering, "Go to sleep, Molière." You grin. You pass a shuttered theater whose marquee still reads, "Tonight, rain on purpose, a one-man monsoon." A puddle glistens nearby, deep enough to reflect the sign upside down. You sidestep it with practiced grace, the umbrella tilting to catch a gust of wind that flirts with your collar. At the end of the street, a woman with silver hair stands in the doorway of a perfume shop. She smokes languidly, watching the world through narrowed eyes. As you pass, she flicks her ash and says, "You remind me of my father." You pause. "A fan of umbrellas?" She nods. Or at least, he was dry when it mattered. She disappears inside, door swinging closed like the last note of a piano tune. A few more turns, a few more blocks, and you arrive at your building, tall, weathered, quietly dignified. The umbrella shakes itself lightly before you close it, not unlike a dog acknowledging the end of a walk. You set it gently inside the door, and as you climb the creaky stairs, each step feels like an echo of the streets you've walked. Paris exhales behind you. You don't wipe your shoes. You've earned the footprints. The stairs moan under your weight, not in protest, but with the familiar resignation of wood that's carried too many secrets. You count the steps like a monk counts beads, each one a little damp, a little worn, but solid beneath your feet. At the third landing, you pause, pressing your fingers to the cool brass keyhole of your door. You turn the key slowly, quietly. Inside, your apartment welcomes you with the scent of dust, chamomile, and whatever memory lingers in old upholstery. You flip the switch. The light flickers once, then steadies, a warm, yellowish glow that softens every surface it touches. You unlace your shoes, set them on the mat like small, exhausted travelers, and glance at the umbrella now resting in the corner. Its canopy still beads the rain perfectly. The Ouroboros handle looks smug again, coiled in confidence. You set it gently beside the door, careful not to let it lean against the radiator. Umbrellas, as you've learned, have tempers. As you change into dry socks and a sweater that smells vaguely of pine, you can't help but wonder, how many people had to get wet before one brave soul said, "Enough"? Historians still argue who truly introduced the umbrella to mainstream Parisian society. Some name the Englishman Jonas Hanway, mocked for years in London before umbrellas gained popularity. Others insist it was the Parisian courtesans who, concerned for their delicate powdered wigs, made umbrellas not only fashionable, but unavoidable. Fringe scholars posit a traveling monk, who allegedly used a wide parasol coated in beeswax and quoted proverbs while keeping his manuscripts dry. You pad to the window with a cup of leftover tisane and peer out. Below, Paris glows faintly, a city made of light and stubbornness. Street lamps halo in the mist. A man walks briskly under his coat, hunched and scowling. Another ambles slowly with a wide parasol, balanced like a halo above his head. Neither acknowledges the rain. You sip your tea, and it tastes like lime blossom and memory. In the drawer near your writing desk, you find it. The small, cloth-bound volume you bought at the bouquiniste last spring. Le Petit Traité de la Parapluie, the little treatise on the umbrella. Half essay, half satire, it claims that the umbrella is the last civilized act in a world obsessed with noble suffering. You thumb through its fragile pages until you find a line underlined in soft pencil. To remain dry in a storm is not arrogance, it is intention. You sit for a long moment, letting that settle. Outside, someone sneezes under a window and mutters a curse in Breton. You smile. Paris never sleeps. It just changes posture. You light a candle, not for ambience, but because the streetlights flicker and your power sometimes goes out when the weather feels moody. The umbrella catches the candlelight now, casting a long, curved shadow on the opposite wall. a ghost of shelter, gently swaying as if remembering wind. You imagine what it must have been like, centuries ago, to be the only one walking dry through a wet world. The stares, the remarks, the petty splashes, and still, someone kept walking, and someone after them, until one day, an umbrella was no longer strange. It was just prepared. That's always how it happens. The outlier becomes the option becomes the norm, and suddenly, no one remembers the scandal of the first dry pedestrian, except the statues, and maybe the pigeons. You blow out the candle. In the dark, the rain starts up again, soft, forgiving, rhythmic. You stretch, yawn, feel your limbs loosen as the tea does its work. And outside, beneath that night-soaked sky, the city breathes. The umbrella waits. Tomorrow, it may not be needed. But tonight, it was your armor, and it didn't fail you. The next morning creeps in gently, like a cat unsure whether it's welcome. Pale light filters through gauzy curtains, revealing the faintest steam still rising from rooftops. You blink, stretch, and glance at the umbrella where you left it. Dry now, of course, but no less proud. You pad across the cool tile floor and lift it once again, feeling the familiar weight in your hand. It's a reassuring sort of heaviness, like a promise from the past that today, too, can be managed with just a bit of fabric and conviction. The rain has stopped. Mostly. A fine mist hangs in the air, making every surface shimmer, as if Paris has been brushed with a pearl's breath. You step outside and open the umbrella anyway, drawing the mildest of scoffs from a man locking up his bicycle. He raises an eyebrow. You offer a calm nod, and for a moment he wavers, then pulls a newspaper from his bag and shields it. Victory. You walk slowly, savoring the stillness of early hours. Shops are only just stirring, awnings unfurling, shutters creaking open like reluctant eyelids. A florist is arranging damp blooms, and you catch the scent of crushed mint and early roses. She spots your umbrella and smiles. "Rain's done," she says. You nod. "Maybe." She shrugs. "Or maybe it's just waiting for applause." Historians still argue whether the 18th century Parisian obsession with weather was driven by agricultural necessity or the city's flair for dramatics. One letter from a nobleman to his sister reads, "It rained twice today. I wept both times." Others suggest the rising cost of fabric encouraged umbrella use as a form of textile preservation. Keep your lace dry. Save your fortune. You turn onto Rue de l'Abbé Grégoire, where puddles mirror balconies, and each leaf looks freshly inked. A child in yellow boots stomps through the deepest one, laughing with glee as a small dog joins the rebellion. Their guardian, holding a bright red umbrella of their own, catches your eye and gives the briefest salute. Umbrella solidarity. It's real. By the time you reach the corner cafe, the city has begun to stir in earnest. You choose a table under the canopy, but still set your umbrella open beside your chair, like a quiet guest with good manners. The waiter arrives, pen tucked behind his ear. "Coffee?" You nod. He gestures to the umbrella. "English?" You shake your head. "Just dry." He chuckles, scribbles, and disappears inside. You sip slowly, watching as the sidewalk becomes a canvas of morning life. A street cleaner hums a tune suspiciously close to Offenbach. A woman in heels, clearly not built for cobblestones, picks her way across them like a tightrope walker on a dare. A pigeon lands beside your table, looks at your umbrella, and waddles off in clear disapproval. You check the time. Still early. You let the coffee cool slightly, not out of forgetfulness, but respect. A man at a nearby table opens a leather portfolio. Papers flutter out in the breeze and begin to escape. You rise, quickly extend your umbrella like a shepherd's crook, and catch a runaway sheet mid-flight. He gasps. Merci. You nod, handing it back. A good umbrella saves more than just heads. He chuckles. And sometimes entire arguments. He raises his cup in a toast. You clink the edge of your spoon against yours and sip again. A newspaper vendor wheels past, calling out headlines you can barely make out. Something about Parliament. Something about pigeons. Possibly the same article. And then, out of the corner of your eye, you spot it. A small brass sign above a narrow green door. La Société des Ombrelles de Paris, Est, 1692. It's barely visible unless you're at just the right angle, in just the right drizzle. You stand, umbrella in hand, and walk toward the door. The door is narrow and painted the kind of green that Paris prefers, somewhere between absinthe and the underside of a lily pad. You knock once, not entirely sure why. It's morning after all, and the door doesn't look particularly magical. Still, the handle is brass and faintly warm, and that seems like a good sign. You push it open. A small bell jingles above your head, not with enthusiasm, but with a kind of weary dignity, as if it has been jingling since Robespierre had his first haircut and has seen enough umbrellas to last several lifetimes. Inside is a vestibule lined with coat hooks, all empty, a wooden bench, a vase filled with dry lavender. It smells like memories and furniture polish. Then, footsteps. A man appears, tall and thin and wearing a waistcoat that has clearly taken an oath of loyalty to another century. He eyes your umbrella the way a vintner might eye a bottle of uncertain age. "Ah," he says, "you're early." You're not sure how to respond, so you nod. He steps aside. "Come." You follow him through a narrow corridor into a room that feels like a forgotten museum exhibit. All carved wood, glass cabinets, soft carpets, and the gentle ticking of 3 wall clocks that somehow disagree politely with one another. And there, arranged in circular stands like knights at court, are umbrellas. All kinds. Paper parasols from Qing dynasty emissaries. Oiled silk rain shields once carried by traveling botanists. A battered black one allegedly owned by a Hungarian opera singer. Each is tagged with a tiny card, some bearing names, others only phrases. Recovered near the Seine, 1902. Too lovely to be lost, too lovely to. Still waterproof against all odds. You drift through them like a dream. The man hands you a ledger. It's thick, bound in red leather, and smells faintly of pipe smoke. Inside are names, hundreds. Some signed in ink, others in delicate pencil, some with flourishing loops, others barely legible. Your guide gestures. If you believe you're ready, you may register your umbrella. You hesitate, then open the pen. On the next blank line, you write your name, and beneath it, the name of your umbrella. You hadn't known it had one until now, but of course it does. Across the room, a woman with a streak of gray in her hair approaches, holding a parasol with the elegance of someone who's stopped trying to justify her taste. "Rain outside?" she asks. You nod. She sighs contentedly. It always knows when to return. Historians still argue whether the Société des Ombrelles was ever officially sanctioned, or if it began as a salon joke that became far too organized. One article in a 19th century journal dismisses it as a club for sentimental waterproofers, while another refers to it as the last noble institution in a city obsessed with chaos. Either way, it endures. The man points to a door. The reading room is through there. We're currently discussing the 1784 ban on umbrellas in certain theaters. Apparently, they were obstructing the view and making scandalous swooshing noises. You suppress a smile. He opens the door, and you step through. Inside is a low-lit space with plush chairs and quiet murmurs. People cradle umbrellas the way others hold books. Some read, some nap. A few simply stare out the window at the passing rain, their thoughts clearly elsewhere, perhaps remembering storms long past. You sit. A server offers you tea in a porcelain cup painted with tiny blue clouds. No one asks your name. No one comments on your umbrella. And somehow, that's the warmest welcome of all. Outside, the rain resumes in earnest, in a steady rhythm, a metronome for dreams. You sip your tea and let the moment steep. The Société may be invisible to most of Paris, but it's always there, waiting for those who walk a little drier. You lose track of time in the reading room. The ambient hum of distant conversation, the whisper of tea being poured, and the subtle percussion of rainfall outside all combine into a kind of living lullaby. Your umbrella rests against your leg, the crook of its handle gently bumping your knee now and then, as if checking in. Still here? Still listening? Eventually, the woman with the silver-streaked hair reappears, balancing a tray of scones. She offers you one with a knowing smile. "They're lemon poppy seed," she says, "dry as principle." You take one gratefully, and she sits beside you, folding her parasol with practiced ease. Hers is adorned with tiny embroidered bees. "I knew a man once," she says, "who insisted umbrellas were a gateway to laziness, said they dulled the spirit, dulled the body." "And the rain?" you ask. "He died of pneumonia," she replies, taking a bite. You both laugh quietly, politely. The conversation shifts to umbrellas in opera, how singers avoided them on stage but demanded them off stage, especially in green rooms where wigs were powdered and tempers were short. Someone nearby murmurs about an 1803 letter that accused a rival soprano of sabotaging an umbrella to collapse dramatically during a royal intermission. Historians still argue whether the letter was sincere or satire, part of a broader wave of theatrical pranks that swept through the Parisian stage world like powdered lightning. Fringe scholars even suggest that umbrella mechanics briefly became a performance art of their own, with specially trained brawly engineers employed behind the curtains. You eat your scone slowly. Crumbs trail down your sweater. You don't brush them off. There is no rush here. Eventually, your hostess stands, collects the tray, and vanishes once more behind a folding screen painted with storm clouds. A man across the room begins reading aloud in an even tone, something from Montaigne, but recast to praise umbrellas. You lean back. Somewhere in your pocket, the little brass invitation card still rests. You touch it, just to confirm it's real. The fire crackles faintly in a small marble hearth. Nearby, someone has left a stack of old magazines from the 1920s. You flip one open to find an ad for an automatic gentleman's rain shield, with the tagline, "Deploys faster than your opponent's insult." You close the magazine and set it aside. You're beginning to understand. Paris didn't fear umbrellas because they were foreign, or because they threatened carriage incomes, or even because they obstructed social rituals involving shared misery. Paris feared them because they represented something disturbingly radical: choice, a refusal to surrender, a refusal to, a quiet rebellion against the accepted inconvenience. To open an umbrella was, in its time, to say, "I'd rather be dry. Thank you very much." The room seems to nod in agreement as a few other guests stir and gather their things. Someone wraps a tartan scarf around their umbrella before departing, a fashion statement and a love letter, both. You rise too. The attendant at the ledger gives you a nod. "Come again," he says. "Will there be more meetings?" "There always are," he replies, "as long as the skies are fickle and the sidewalks wet." Outside, the rain has calmed again to mist. Your umbrella opens easily, with a polite swoosh, and the first drop that hits its canvas sounds almost like applause. You walk aimlessly at first, letting the city reclaim your pace. Past bakeries now bustling with morning chatter. Past the plaza where a mime performs for an audience of damp pigeons and one very serious child in galoshes. Past a fountain that burbles in sympathy with the clouds above. And finally, to the foot of a modest statue in a quiet courtyard. You read the plaque. "To those who walked dry when all walked wet. The Umbrella Society of Paris. Anonymous benefactor. 1881. You stand for a moment, umbrella in hand, watching the rain dimple the surface of a nearby puddle. A breeze nudges your coat, and a dry leaf skitters past. You take one last look at the statue, then continue on. Not hurrying, just dry. By the time you reach the Seine, the mist has thinned to a delicate haze. The river glides under its bridges, silver gray and whispering secrets only the statues seem to understand. You pause at the edge, umbrella lightly tapping your shoulder with each shift of the wind. Around you, Paris stretches, yawns, and pulls its shawl of clouds tighter. The city is always at its most thoughtful in weather like this. Half awake, half forgotten. You watch a painter unfold his canvas beneath the Pont Neuf. He doesn't mind the damp. In fact, he seems to relish it. A half-finished skyline takes form in soft pastels, domes and spires blurred just enough to seem imagined. "Trying to catch the fog?" you ask as you pass. He grins without looking up. "Trying to miss it, actually." A few meters on, you spot an old woman feeding birds beneath a cafe awning. She's holding her umbrella like a parasol, tilted back to reveal an absurdly embroidered lining. Tiny dancing frogs. She catches your eye and shrugs. "I like company when it rains." Historians still argue whether umbrellas in Paris truly caused enough public disruption to be debated in local councils, or whether the few written complaints, mostly in theatrical journals and bourgeois diaries, were simply exaggerated anecdotes passed around for amusement. But in the archives of the Hôtel de Ville, there exists one faded petition with over 200 signatures demanding regulated umbrella use in public markets, citing eye-poking incidents and insufferable smugness. You walk on, letting that phrase echo, insufferable smugness. Maybe that's what made the umbrella so dangerous. It wasn't just dry, it looked pleased about it. You cross a narrow alleyway where a shutter creaks open and a cat peeks out, eyes narrowed at your umbrella like it's an interloper. You nod at the cat. The cat blinks once, then disappears. Even felines respect dryness. The cobblestones beneath your feet are polished slick by centuries of weather, boots, and stubborn footsteps. You tread carefully, umbrella angled just so to avoid drips from eaves. The motion is automatic now, muscle memory forged not in storm but in gentle defiance. At Rue Saint-André, you find a bookshop, its window fogged from within, its display of travel memoirs and antique cookbooks arranged like an accidental poem. You step inside and the bell above the door rings in a tired, familiar tone. The shopkeeper glances at your umbrella and sighs. Finally, someone civilized. You smile. It's becoming less rare. She raises an eyebrow. You part of the society? You hesitate. She nods knowingly. Of course you are. Or you will be. You browse. Find an old copy of Baudelaire, pages water-warped like the poet preferred it that way. A tiny book of weather proverbs sits beside it, including this gem. If the rain begins at dawn, don't trust your neighbor's goose. You have questions. You do not ask them. Back on the street, you pass a group of school children leaping puddles with the kind of abandon only dry socks can forgive. One carries a pirate-themed umbrella with a Jolly Roger on top. He waves it like a saber. His teacher, rain-soaked and serene, follows patiently behind. Down by the old clock tower, a street violinist plays under a shop's overhang. His case is open for coins, but also holds an umbrella handle. No canopy, just the curved top like a relic. You drop in a coin. He nods without pausing his song, a tune that sounds suspiciously like La Vie en Rose if she'd had a cold. You pause again at the edge of the square. Here, for a moment, the rain stops entirely. You lower your umbrella. The world is hushed. Raindrops cling to every branch, every wire, every iron fence like crystal punctuation. A breath, a heartbeat. Then the rain returns, softly, shyly, almost like it's asking permission. You smile, lift your umbrella, and walk on. You find yourself drifting back toward the marais, your umbrella guiding the way like a loyal carriage horse of silk and spring steel. The streets are quieter now, tucked under a light drizzle that patters like fingers on parchment. It's the kind of rain Paris does best, emphatically poetic and mostly decorative. Along the way, you pass a wrought iron gate wrapped in ivy and paper posters from long past protests. One of them, barely legible, reads, Faites confiance aux nuages. Trust the clouds. Sage advice, really. You glance skyward. The clouds do not object. Your umbrella seems pleased. You duck under an archway and step into a courtyard of uncertain ownership. It's one of those corners of Paris that seems to exist between bureaucratic lines, a place neither public nor private, a space made more for echoes than footsteps. Here, a memory returns, half-formed and watercolored, of a man you once saw arguing with a lamppost about umbrellas being bourgeois armor. He had no umbrella, and also no hat. He sneezed mid-thesis. You'd offered him yours. He declined on principle. Historians still argue whether the umbrella became normalized in Paris out of necessity or stubbornness. Some claim it was fashion that finally gave in, tailors needing a way to preserve their clients' ridiculous fabrics. Others suggest it was municipal, cobblestones made safer by fewer slips and falls. But a small camp of thinkers insists it was romance. That lovers huddling beneath shared umbrellas finally made them immune to scorn. You pass a bakery that smells like almond and sugar and wet wool. A fresh tray of galettes sits in the window, slightly fogged with heat. Your reflection smiles back at you, umbrella in hand, looking vaguely like someone from a painting too unambitious for the Louvre. At the canal, ducks paddle lazily, indifferent to both drizzle and traffic. A young man sketches them from a bench, his sketch pad slowly soaking. You offer your umbrella. He waves it off and shrugs. It makes the lines better, he says. You nod. Artists are like that. You pause on a footbridge. The city unfolds around you, not just in architecture, but in atmosphere. In chimneys puffing softly into the gray, in the click of heels against wet pavement, in the quiet determination of a city that has always kept walking, whether soaked or not. You lower your umbrella once more. Just for a second, letting the rain tap your head like a fond, insistent aunt. And then you raise it again, not because you fear the rain, but because you choose not to be wet. That's what the umbrella is, after all. Not rebellion, not defiance, not even convenience. Just choice. And in a city built on spectacle, ceremony, and pastry, that's as radical as it gets. You turn the last corner, and your apartment door greets you like a sigh. Inside, the umbrella rests in its spot, content. A little wetter than this morning, a little wiser too. You remove your coat, set the kettle going. The warmth creeps into your spine like sunlight filtered through lace. You look out the window. The rain has slowed to mist again. Then it pauses. And then it stops. You smile, but you leave the umbrella by the door anyway, just in case. Now the rain has faded to memory, and so too must we. You're safe now, tucked in somewhere warm, the echoes of wet footsteps and soft umbrellas fading gently behind your eyelids. You can still hear the Paris of it all, the lilting cadence of quiet cafes, the distant hum of wheels on cobblestone, and the hushed companionship of strangers who share sidewalks under shared storms. Let that rhythm slow your breath. Each inhale, like lifting the canopy of your own thoughts. Each exhale, like releasing the weight of your day, letting it roll off your shoulders like a forgotten drizzle. There is peace in the mundane, in the gentle flap of a folding frame, in the scent of chamomile and rain-damp wool, in knowing that even in centuries past, someone else worried about the same thing you do, whether to carry the umbrella or gamble with the weather. Let that comfort carry you now. Drift through puddled courtyards, where your footsteps leave no mark. Imagine the brush of mist on your cheek, cool and soft as sleep. You are dry. You are safe. You are wrapped in a story older than you, but one that somehow always fits. The streets of history are quiet tonight, and your umbrella, whether open, closed, or only imagined, is exactly where it should be, right beside you. Good night. End of script. Sweet dreams.